I was just adding a pinch of thyme to the chicken soup when the world went sideways. My daughter-in-law, Sophia, hit me across the temple with a heavy steel ladle. "Who cooks like that, you incompetent old woman?" she shrieked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Hot soup and hotter metal seared my skin. But the real burn came from the living room. My son, Michael, sitting right there on the sofa, just turned up the volume on his podcast. He didn't flinch. He didn't look. He just erased me. 5 minutes later, an earth-shattering crash echoed from the kitchen. Pots, pans, my entire life's worth of dignity scattered across the floor. Michael came running and froze at the sight of me, a broken old woman amidst the wreckage. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered, his eyes full of disappointment, not concern. But what neither of them knew in that moment, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that I still had one last card to play. A secret so powerful it was about to bring their perfect, curated world crashing down around them. And trust me, you're gonna want to see what happens at the very end. My name is Emily. I'm 68 years old, and my hands are a roadmap of a life spent serving others. Until recently, I believed family was everything. A sacred bond. What a fool I'd been. 6 months ago, I said goodbye to my husband, James. 50 years of a quiet, beautiful life together ended on a Tuesday afternoon when his heart just stopped. I found him in his favorite armchair, the newspaper still resting in his lap. Since that day, my world had shrunk to the size of a silent, dusty house filled with ghosts and memories that ached to the touch. Michael, my only son, was insistent. "You can't stay in that big house alone, Mom. It's not safe at your age," he'd said, his voice dripping with what I mistook for concern. I was so desperate for family, so afraid of the silence, that I believed him. I packed up 50 years of my life into 4 suitcases, leaving behind the home where James and I danced in the kitchen and where every scuff on the floor told a story. Michael and Sophia's house was something out of a magazine. Gleaming white floors, minimalist furniture that looked like it would break if you sat on it too hard, and a chilling, sterile silence. Sophia greeted me with a smile that was all teeth. "Welcome, Emily," she'd said. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Parker. Just Emily. As if I were the new cleaning lady. From the very first day, I knew I'd made a catastrophic mistake. My room was the smallest one at the back of the house, overlooking a brick wall. I arranged my photos of James on the nightstand and tried to make myself small, to exist without taking up space. That was my new job, to be a helpful, invisible ghost. My days started at 5:30 a.m. I'd make the coffee, a special dark roast Michael loved, and prepare breakfast. Scrambled eggs, just how he liked them, crispy bacon, and freshly squeezed orange juice. Michael would come down, buried in his phone, and mumble, "Thanks, Mom," without ever looking up. Sophia would descend an hour later, wrapped in a silk robe, her face already a mask of perfectly applied makeup for her work-from-home life as a social media influencer. She'd inspect my work with the critical eye of a health inspector. "These eggs are rubbery," she'd announce. "This coffee tastes like dirt." Never a thank you. Just a daily inventory of my failures. I would just nod, smile, and vow to try harder tomorrow. I wanted to be useful. I needed to be needed. The weeks crawled by. I cooked, cleaned. I did their laundry, folding Michael's shirts and Sophia's endless stream of designer outfits. I became the house's silent servant, picking up after 2 fully grown adults who treated their home like a hotel. Sophia was always on important calls or filming herself talking about mindfulness and living your best life, while I was on my hands and knees scrubbing a stain she'd made on the floor. Any little stress in her day was immediately redirected at me. "Why is this here?" she'd snap, pointing at a book I'd left on a coffee table. "You are literally useless." And Michael, he was a phantom in his own home. He saw it, he heard it, and he did nothing. He'd just retreat into his headphones, his laptop, his own world. He chose peace over his own mother. There were so many nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where I went wrong. Was this the boy I'd raised? The one who used to bring me dandelions and call me his best friend? Silent tears would soak my pillow, but I always dried them before sunrise. I couldn't show weakness. I couldn't give them another reason to see me as a burden. But that afternoon, as I was making the chicken noodle soup, Michael's favorite since he was a boy, something inside me finally snapped. I was carefully dicing carrots, lost in a memory of making this same soup for a sick little Michael years ago, when Sophia stormed in. "What on earth is that smell?" she demanded, her nose wrinkled in disgust. "It's chicken soup for dinner," I said softly, not turning around. "Michael's favorite." She stalked over to the pot, peered inside, and her face contorted. "This looks like dishwater. How much salt did you dump in here? Are you trying to give us a heart attack?" Her words were like 1,000 tiny needles. I tried to explain that I hadn't even seasoned it yet, but she wasn't listening. She snatched the heavy stainless steel ladle from the pot, dripping with hot broth, and before I could even process what was happening, she swung. The blow was stunning. A galaxy of stars exploded behind my eyes. I felt the searing heat of the metal against my temple, the sticky, hot liquid running down my face and into my hair. "Who cooks like that, you incompetent old woman?" Sophia screamed, her voice echoing through the sterile, silent house. I staggered back, grabbing the counter to keep from falling. And from the living room I heard it. The clear, distinct sound of Michael's podcast getting louder. He was there. He heard her scream. He heard the impact. And he chose to drown it out. That was it. That was the moment the last flicker of hope inside me died. The physical pain was nothing, a dull throb compared to the atomic blast of that betrayal. My son. The baby I carried, the boy I raised, the man I loved with every fiber of my being, had just chosen the voice of a stranger in his ears over the sound of his mother's suffering. I stood there, leaning against the stove, the soup-covered ladle lying at my feet like a murder weapon. Sophia glared at me, her chest heaving, expecting me to crumble, to apologize, to beg her for forgiveness for my own existence. But all I could think about was the increased volume from the living room. He knew. He absolutely knew, and he chose to be a coward. "You're pathetic," Sophia spat, crossing her arms. "Look at this mess you've made. You can't do a single thing right. I have no idea why Michael insisted on bringing you here. You're just a useless old burden." Every word was a fresh wound. My own voice was a prisoner in my throat. I tried to bend down to clean up the drips of soup on the pristine white floor, but my hands were shaking too badly. My head was pounding. Sophia huffed and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone in the steam and the silence. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes of standing there, replaying the sound of that podcast getting louder, for a lifetime of quiet compliance to burn away. I looked at the pots on the stove. I looked at the neatly stacked dishes I had washed just an hour earlier. I looked at this kitchen I had slaved in for months, trying to earn a love that was never on offer. And I exploded. It wasn't a plan. It was a primal scream made manifest. I grabbed the pot of soup, the very soup she had insulted, and hurled its contents into the sink. The scalding liquid roared down the drain. Then I grabbed another pot. And another. I didn't just drop them. Threw them. They clanged and crashed against the counters, the floor, the stainless steel refrigerator. The sound was deafening. Liberating. Necessary. Plates slid from my hands, shattering into a million pieces. Cutlery flew. It was a symphony of destruction. I heard Michael's frantic footsteps. "What the hell was that?" he yelled from the hallway. He skidded to a halt in the kitchen doorway, his face going pale. He saw me, standing in the middle of the chaos, a trickle of blood and soup running down my temple. "Mom, what did you do?" he whispered. He didn't move toward me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just stared at the mess, as if I had defiled his perfect, sterile home. Sophia appeared behind him, her eyes wide with shock, which quickly morphed into incandescent rage. "She's lost her mind. Your mother is completely insane," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Look what she's done. She destroyed my kitchen. Call someone, Michael." This woman needs to be locked up. Michael finally looked at me, his eyes begging me to have a good reason to make this all go away. He wanted me to be the crazy one. It was easier that way. Mom, why? He pleaded, his voice cracking. Why would you do this? Why? I repeated, my voice raspy and broken. Your wife hit me, Michael. She hit me in the head with a boiling hot ladle. And you turned up your podcast. The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He blinked, a flicker of something, guilt, confusion, in his eyes. I didn't hear it, Mom. I didn't know. Liar. The word shot out of me, sharp and true. You were 10 feet away. You heard everything. And you chose to do nothing. Sophia stepped forward, placing herself between me and her husband. I will not be slandered in my own home. I won't live under the same roof as this ungrateful, violent old woman. You have to choose, Michael. It's her or me. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I stared at my son, my heart pleading with him. Choose me. Remember who I am. Remember all the years I chose you. But Michael's gaze dropped to the floor. His hands slid into his pockets. He was a man defeated. I'm sorry, Mom, he mumbled, the words barely audible. But I think it's for the best. This isn't working out. You're causing problems. You need to leave. My world tilted on its axis. My heart didn't just break. It atomized. You're kicking me out. I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. Your wife assaults me, and you're kicking me out? It's not like that, Mom. Sophia and we need our space. And you need your independence. It'll be better for everyone, he said, reciting lines that sounded like they'd been fed to him. The man speaking wasn't my son. He was a stranger wearing my son's face. When? I asked, the hot sting of tears finally beginning to burn. Tomorrow morning. I'll call you a cab. You can get a hotel while you find a more permanent place. I'll help with some of the expenses. He was firing me from the job of being his mother. He couldn't even look me in the eye. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed in my little room, staring at the picture of James. What would he say if he could see this? I packed my 4 suitcases with a slow, deliberate calm, folding each dress, each sweater, as if the neatness could contain the shattering chaos inside me. At dawn, I heard the honk of the taxi. Michael was waiting by the front door, holding out $200 bills. For getting settled, he said, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder. I didn't hug him. I didn't say goodbye. I just took the money, gripped the handles of my suitcases, and walked out of that cold white house without a single look back. Where to, ma'am? The taxi driver asked. Had no answer. I had nowhere to go. Any cheap motel, I finally choked out. He dropped me at a place on the edge of town, a roadside joint with a flickering neon sign and a smell of stale cigarettes and despair. The room was $35 a night. With the $200 Michael had given me, I could survive for 5 days. The room was a beige box of misery. Stained carpet, a lumpy bed, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot filled with broken-down cars. The flickering red neon sign cast a sickly glow over everything. I sat on that bed, and for the first time since James died, I let myself truly cry. Not the silent, polite tears of a grieving widow. These were ragged, animal sobs that clawed their way up from a deep, dark well of pain. I cried for James. I cried for the son I had lost. And I cried for the woman I used to be, who had vanished so completely I couldn't even remember her face. When the tears finally stopped, there was only a hollow emptiness. I looked at myself in the grimy bathroom mirror. A 68-year-old woman with swollen eyes, tangled gray hair, and a purplish-red burn on her temple. I touched it gently. The physical pain was almost a comfort compared to the soul-deep ache of betrayal. The days became a blur. I rationed the snacks I'd bought from a vending machine. I sent a few messages to Michael. First dignified, "Son, we need to talk." No reply. Then direct, "Michael, the money is almost gone." The message was marked "Read," but the silence was absolute. It was like screaming into the void. On the 6th day, the money was gone. The motel manager knocked on my door. "Ma'am, checkout was an hour ago. You need to pay up or clear out." I tried to explain, to beg for another day, but he just shook his head. "Sorry, lady. Rules are rules." So I packed my 4 heavy suitcases again and dragged them out into the blistering sun. I walked for hours with no destination in mind. My feet blistered. My arms ached. But I kept moving because to stop was to admit defeat. I ended up in a public park downtown. I found a secluded bench and just sat there, watching families play, watching life go on without me. A young mother walked by with her son, a little boy about 5. He pointed at me, and his mother yanked his hand away, hurrying him along as if my poverty were a contagious disease. That was my first night sleeping on a bench. I clutched my purse to my chest, my suitcases forming a pathetic little fortress around me. The next day, hunger gnawed at me with an intensity that eclipsed pride. I found myself behind a restaurant, my hands shaking as I pulled a half-eaten sandwich and some bruised fruit from a dumpster. I ate it huddled in an alley, hidden from view, my cheeks burning with shame. There was a church nearby that offered free meals on Tuesdays. I stood in a long line of broken people, their stories etched into the lines on their faces. A young volunteer handed me a bowl of soup with a pitying smile that made me feel even smaller. The nights were the worst. The cold seeped into my bones. I'd lie on the hard bench, listening to the city's restless hum, and wonder if Michael ever thought of me. Did he picture his mother shivering in the dark while he slept in his warm bed? 2 weeks passed. Or maybe it was 3. I lost track. I was dirty. I was exhausted. I had become one of the invisible people you pretend not to see on the street. But then, in the deepest pit of my despair, something happened. I was rummaging through one of my suitcases, looking for a clean pair of socks, when my fingers brushed against a hard-edged envelope I didn't remember packing. It was tucked into a side pocket, old and yellowed with age. Written on the front in James's familiar, steady hand was my name, Emily. My heart gave a painful lurch. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside was a letter and a thick stack of folded documents. The letter began, "My dearest Emily." I knew instantly when he'd written it. 3 years ago, when he'd had a bad bout of pneumonia. He'd told me it was just a scare, but I realized now he had been staring his own mortality in the face. "If you're reading this," the letter went on, "it means I'm gone. Forgive me for not telling you everything when I was alive. I always thought I was protecting you by handling the finances, but I see now that keeping you in the dark was a mistake." Tears welled in my eyes, blurring his words. "For the last 30 years I made some investments, small ones at first. I bought a few properties when nobody wanted them, in neighborhoods that I had a hunch would grow. Save. I was careful. I did it all for you, Emily. For our future. For your security. I never told you because I wanted to surprise you one day, to tell you we could travel the world, that you'd never have to worry about a single thing again." My breath caught in my throat. I unfolded the documents. They were property deeds, stock certificates, bank statements. My eyes scanned the pages, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. An apartment building downtown. Small commercial plaza. Shares in blue-chip companies. Account numbers with so many zeros they looked like a typo. My hands were shaking so violently the papers rattled. Counted them. 13 properties. 15. My name. And then I saw an address that made the world stop. Magnolia Street. Number 452. It was the address of the modern, sterile building where Michael and Sophia lived. The building I had been thrown out of. The home where I had been humiliated, assaulted, and discarded like trash. It was mine. It had been mine the entire time. A strange, hysterical sound bubbled up from my chest. It wasn't a sob. It was a laugh. I laughed and I cried. Right there on that park bench, a crazy old homeless woman clutching a multi-million-dollar portfolio. People stared and hurried past, but I didn't care. James's letter had a final page. Contact our lawyer David Cole. He has all the originals and knows everything. His number is below. Emily, my love, you are the strongest person I have ever known. Never let anyone make you feel small. If anyone ever wrongs you, remember this. You hold the power now. Use it. I looked at the piece of paper that held the proof. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't useless. I was the owner of an estate worth, by a quick and conservative guess, over $10 million. And I had been eating out of a garbage can. The irony was so sharp, so brutal, it was almost beautiful. I stopped crying. The laughter died down. And in its place, something new and cold and hard began to form. I found a payphone, my fingers shaking as I dialed the number for David Cole's law firm. Crisp, professional voice answered. Cole and Associates, how may I direct your call? I need to speak with David Cole, I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. It's about James Parker. There was a pause. May I ask who is calling? I am Emily Parker, I said. James's widow. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Mrs. Parker, the voice finally said, suddenly urgent. We've been trying to reach you for months. Mr. Cole needs to see you. Urgently. Where are you? I told him the name of the park. He said a car would be there in 20 minutes. I went back to my bench and waited, clutching James's letter like a holy text. The car that pulled up was a sleek, black sedan. The driver, a man in a crisp suit, got out and opened the back door for me without a flicker of judgment in his eyes. He loaded my worn-out suitcases into the trunk, and I sank into the plush leather seat. The car smelled of wealth and success. My old life was over. My new one was just beginning. The law firm was on the 40th floor of a glass skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The elevator ride was silent and swift, and for a moment, I saw my reflection in the polished steel doors. A grimy, wild-eyed woman in rumpled clothes. I looked away, ashamed. But then James's words echoed in my mind. You are the strongest person I have ever known. I straightened my back. The reception area was bigger than my old house, with a panoramic view of Los Angeles sprawling below. The receptionist, a young woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, gave me a brief, dismissive glance before her eyes landed on the stern-faced driver behind me. Her expression shifted instantly. Mr. Cole is expecting you, she said, her voice suddenly warm. Right this way, Mrs. Parker. David Cole was a man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a handshake as solid as an oak tree. He saw my dirty clothes, my matted hair, and the angry red burn on my temple. I saw a flicker of shock in his eyes, but he smothered it with professionalism. Mrs. Parker, Emily, please have a seat, he said, guiding me to a soft leather chair. Can I get you some water? Coffee? Something to eat? Water, please, I whispered, my throat dry as dust. He poured a glass from a crystal pitcher and handed it to me. I drank it all in one go. He patiently refilled it. Emily, he began gently, we've been very worried. We've been trying to find you since James passed. We sent letters, left messages. Your son, he told us you had moved on, and didn't wish to be contacted. My son, I said, the words tasting like ash, kicked me out of his house 3 weeks ago. I've been living in a park. David's jaw tightened. The professional mask slipped, and for a second I saw pure, unadulterated anger. I am so sorry to hear that. What James feared most. Well, let's get you taken care of. Then we can talk about everything else. Did you review the documents he left for you? I pulled the crumpled yellowed envelope from my purse and laid it on his vast mahogany desk. I found this yesterday. I don't understand most of it. These are copies, he said, nodding. I have the certified originals right here. He opened a thick binder. Let me try to explain your situation, Emily. You are not just financially stable. You are a very wealthy woman. He broke it down for me, number by staggering number. 13 commercial and residential properties across Los Angeles, conservatively valued at around $8 million. a portfolio of stocks and bonds worth another $2.5 million, and 3 separate bank accounts with a combined liquid cash total of just over $600,000. The numbers didn't feel real. They were just sounds hanging in the air. $11 million. 11 million. I thought of the half-eaten sandwich I'd pulled from the trash, the gnawing hunger, the freezing nights on that bench. It can't be, I whispered. It is, he said firmly. And there's something else you need to see. He slid a document across the desk. As you discovered, one of the buildings you own is at 452 Magnolia Street. Your son, Michael, and his wife, Sophia, reside in apartment 5B. Yes, I nodded slowly. You should know, David continued, his voice carefully neutral, that they have been living there under a family and friends lease agreement that James granted them 5 years ago. They pay $500 a month for a penthouse apartment that, on the current market, would rent for $4,000. $500. They were paying a pittance, a token amount, to live in a luxury penthouse, all thanks to the generosity of the man whose memory they had desecrated by throwing his wife out onto the street. Michael had stood there and told me he couldn't afford to help me with more than $200, while he was living a life of extreme luxury subsidized by the very father he claimed to be honoring. A cold, clear anger, sharper and more potent than anything I had ever felt, washed over me. It burned away the last vestiges of grief and despair. I looked David straight in the eye. Can I cancel that contract? I asked, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. He paused, studying my face. You are the owner, Emily. You can do anything you want. There are, of course, legal procedures. You can't just throw them out tomorrow. But we can make changes. I don't want to throw them out, I said, the words coming out colder than I intended. Not yet. I want to raise their rent to the full market price. $4,000. Effective as soon as legally possible. David nodded slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. That is entirely within your rights. We'll need to serve them a 30-day notice of the change in contract terms. Are you certain? Completely. Very well. He made a note. Now let's deal with more immediate concerns. Your housing. You can move into any of your vacant properties, or I can arrange a hotel for you while you decide. He stood up and made a call. In less than 5 minutes it was done. A suite at the Four Seasons downtown. All expenses billed to an account that I hadn't even known existed an hour ago. Before I left his office, David handed me a slim black credit card. This is linked to one of your checking accounts, he explained. The initial limit is set at $50,000 for immediate expenses. Use it for whatever you need. And Emily. He handed me another sealed envelope from his desk drawer. James made me promise. He said, if my Emily ever comes to you looking like life has beaten her down, give her this. And tell her I always knew she was a fighter. Opened it right there. It was another short letter from James. My love, if you're reading this, it means you've had to fight. I'm sorry I'm not there to fight with you. But know this, I built this all for you. Every brick, every stock, every dollar. It was never about the money. It was about giving you a shield, an armor, fortress. Don't let anyone, not even our own blood, dim your light. You are a queen, Emily. It's time to claim your throne. I sank back into the chair, tears streaming down my face. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of gratitude, of a terrible newfound strength. James had known. Somehow. He had known a day might come when I would need more than his love to protect me. He had given me an arsenal. The hotel suite was like a palace from a dream. Soft carpets, a bed as big as my entire motel room, and a marble bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in. 24 hours ago, I was trying to find a safe place to sleep in a public park. Now, I was in a room that cost more per night than Michael had given me to survive. The first thing I did was run a bath. I filled the tub to the brim with scalding hot water and sank into it. I watched as the water turned gray, clouded with the dirt and grime of the streets. I scrubbed my skin until it was raw, washing away not just the filth, but the shame, the humiliation, the feeling of being invisible. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a fluffy white robe, I felt like a snake that had shed its old, tight skin. I ordered room service. Roast chicken, a green salad, fresh bread, a bottle of expensive wine. When the cart arrived, I ate slowly, savoring every single bite. This wasn't just food. It was power. It was dignity. It was the first meal of the rest of my life. I slept for 14 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep, secure behind a locked door for the first time in weeks. When I woke up, the California sun was streaming through the windows, and my new reality settled over me. For the next week, David became my guide. He drove me to see every one of my properties. Apartment buildings buzzing with life, quiet commercial plazas, a row of charming storefronts in a gentrifying neighborhood. Each one was a testament to James's quiet brilliance, his foresight, his love for me. The total net income from all rentals after taxes and maintenance is about $50,000 a month, he told me as we sat in his office, reviewing spreadsheets. That's $600,000 a year. And that's without touching a penny of your investments. $600,000 a year. And I had been standing in line for a free bowl of watery soup. The irony was a constant, bitter companion. But now it was fuel. A plan was taking shape in my mind. Quiet, methodical, patient plan. David, I said one afternoon, I need to make some changes. But I need to do it without anyone knowing it's me. He leaned forward, intrigued. What kind of changes? First, the Magnolia Street building. Raise Michael's rent, as we discussed. But I want you to review every lease in that building. Any other sweetheart deals, any special favors, end them. I want that building run like a business, not a charity. Done, he said, typing on his computer. Second, I continued, feeling a surge of confidence. I need a new identity. Business name. I don't want the name Emily Parker on any document going forward. We can set up an LLC, a limited liability company, he explained. You'll be the sole, anonymous owner. We just need a name. Thought for a moment. I thought of the fire of my anger, the ashes of my old life. Phoenix Properties, I said. Call it Phoenix Properties. The next 2 weeks were a blur of transformation. I walked into the fanciest salon in Beverly Hills looking like a homeless woman and walked out looking powerful. My gray, tangled hair was cut and styled into an elegant chic bob, colored a sophisticated shade of silver. I went to boutiques where patient young women helped me pick out a new wardrobe. Not frilly dresses, but tailored pantsuits, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters in shades of charcoal, navy, and cream. Everything whispered money and control. I got a manicure. I bought new modern eyeglasses. I wasn't trying to look younger. I was finally starting to look like myself. David became my professor. He taught me how to read financial statements, how to analyze a deal, how to talk to contractors and property managers. And a strange thing happened. I was good at it. I had a natural instinct for numbers and a knack for seeing the potential in a property. You have a gift for this, Emily, David said one day, impressed. James had the vision, but you have the killer instinct. Maybe I'd had it all along, buried under 50 years of making pot roast and folding laundry. Now it was awake. The rent increase notices went out to the tenants of 452 Magnolia Street, signed by Phoenix Properties Management. As expected, the reaction from apartment 5B was immediate and volcanic. We have a situation, David told me over the phone, a note of amusement in his voice. A Mr. Michael Parker has called my office 9 times in the last 2 hours. He's demanding to speak to the owner. He says there's been a terrible mistake, that he has a special arrangement. Tell Mr. Parker there is no mistake, I replied calmly, sipping my tea on the hotel balcony. And tell him the owner of Phoenix Properties does not speak to tenants directly. All communication must go through you. He's threatening legal action. Let him, I said. I believe I can afford it. Days passed. David kept me updated. Mr. Parker is in a full-blown panic. He's been trying to get a loan to cover the new rent, But it seems his finances are precarious. He and his wife have a lot of debt. Good, I said, the word coming out like a chip of ice. It wasn't joy. It was the cold satisfaction of a perfectly executed first move in a chess game. Michael had made his choices. Now the consequences were coming due. But I wasn't done. The rent was just the opening salvo. It was time to aim for the queen. I hired a discreet private investigator, one of the best, recommended by David. I want to know everything about Sophia Parker, I told him. Her work, her clients, her finances. Everything. The report came back in 3 days. Sophia's influencer career was a carefully constructed sham. She had a modest following, but her real income came from just one major client, a high-end boutique PR firm called Starlight Creative. They paid her a hefty monthly retainer to promote their clients' luxury brands. Her entire lifestyle, the designer clothes, the expensive lunches, the carefully curated image of success, was funded by this one firm. And then I saw it. The detail that made my heart beat faster. The address for Starlight Creative's main office. It was a commercial plaza in a trendy part of the city. My commercial plaza. They were my tenants. The next morning I met with David. The tenant in Suite 204 at the Westgate Plaza, I said, sliding the investigator's report across the desk. Starlight Creative. What's their lease situation? He pulled the file. They're on a month-to-month, paying $3,000. Good tenants, always on time. I want to raise their rent, I said. To what? I did some quick math in my head. A number that would be painful but not impossible. A number that would force them to make cuts. Raise it to $7,000 a month. Effective in 30 days. David raised an eyebrow. That's a significant jump, Emily. More than double. They'll almost certainly leave. Let them leave, I said. It's my property. And I feel it's been undervalued. Starlight Creative didn't leave. But they did, just as I'd predicted. Immediately look to cut costs. And what's the easiest thing for a PR firm to cut? The freelance contractors who aren't essential to their core business. 2 weeks later, David called me. By the way, he said, his voice casual, an interesting bit of news. Starlight Creative just terminated several of their influencer contracts to offset their new overhead. One of the names on the list was Sophia Parker. I simply nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple from my hotel window. Checkmate was coming. This was just the setup. Weeks turned into a month. I moved out of the hotel and into a beautiful, unoccupied penthouse apartment in one of my own buildings downtown. It was my war room. I spent my days studying, learning, and planning. The first of the month arrived. The rent for 452 Magnolia Street, apartment 5B, was due. It didn't come. David called me on the 2nd. They missed the payment, Emily. Michael Parker called this morning, begging for an extension. He said his wife lost her job and they're having a tough time. I felt a ghost of pity, but I swatted it away. I remembered the cold park bench. I remembered the sound of the podcast volume going up. There are no extensions, I said, my voice unwavering. Serve him the official pay or quit notice tomorrow morning. We follow the law. To the letter. That gives him 3 days to pay the full amount, or we begin formal eviction proceedings, David confirmed. I know, I said. The dice were cast. The machine was in motion. Michael had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies and entitlement. I was just the wind coming to blow it all down. The 3 days passed in agonizing silence. According to David, the law firm's phone lines were quiet. No frantic calls from Michael, no angry voicemails from Sophia. It was the eerie calm before a storm. On the 4th day, David called me. He didn't pay, Emily. I have the paperwork ready to file the eviction with the court tomorrow morning. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? An eviction on his record will ruin his credit for years. It's a bell that can't be unrung. I thought of the burn on my temple, now a faint, silvery scar. I thought of the shame of eating from a dumpster. I thought of my son choosing the comfort of his marriage over the safety of his mother. File it, David, I said. The legal process moved with a cold, impersonal efficiency. Once filed, the court scheduled a hearing. Michael and Sophia were formally served with a summons to appear. The investigator I'd kept on retainer sent me updates. The atmosphere in apartment 5B had become toxic. Neighbors reported shouting matches at all hours. Doors slamming. One neighbor heard Sophia scream, "This is all your fault. You and your useless mother." A part of me, the old, soft, motherly part, flinched at these reports. But the new Emily, the CEO of Phoenix Properties, simply filed the information away. This was a business transaction. And my son was a defaulting client. The eviction hearing was scheduled on a Tuesday morning in a drab, soulless courtroom downtown. David had insisted I didn't need to be there, but I had to see it. I needed to witness the consequences of their actions firsthand. I dressed carefully that morning. A dark charcoal pantsuit, a simple cream silk blouse, my hair pulled back, my new glasses perched on my nose. I looked like a lawyer or a businesswoman. I looked nothing like the broken woman who had fled their house months ago. I sat in the back row of the public gallery, a ghost in plain sight. Michael and Sophia arrived a few minutes before their case was called. Michael looked like a wreck. His suit was rumpled, he'd lost weight, and the dark circles under his eyes were cavernous. He looked haunted. Sophia, by contrast, was a vision of defiant glamour. She wore a bright red dress, stilettos, and a face of perfectly applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the fury in her eyes. She radiated contempt for the entire proceeding. They sat with a young, nervous-looking lawyer who was clearly out of his depth. When their case was called, Phoenix Properties LLC versus Michael and Sophia Parker, I watched David approach the judge's bench. He was calm, organized, and utterly professional. He presented the lease agreement, the notice of rent increase, the missed payment notifications, the formal pay or quit notice. It was an open and shut case. Their lawyer fumbled through a weak defense, claiming the rent increase was retaliatory and unconscionable. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, looked over the paperwork with a bored expression. "Mr. Parker," the judge said, addressing my son directly, "is it correct that you are currently 2 months behind on your rent, totaling $8,000 plus late fees?" Michael stood, his shoulders slumped. "Yes, Your Honor, but we've had some unexpected financial setbacks." "Financial setbacks are not a legal defense for non-payment of rent," the judge said flatly. "Do you have the money to pay what you owe today?" Michael looked at Sophia. She just stared straight ahead, a muscle twitching in her jaw. He looked at his lawyer, who gave a helpless shrug. "No, Your Honor," Michael mumbled. "Then I have no choice," the judge declared, her voice devoid of emotion. "Judgment is for the plaintiff. The defendants have 10 days to vacate the premises." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed the sound of my heart breaking and healing all at once. It was done. Sophia erupted. "This is insane. You can't just make people homeless," she shrieked, standing up so fast her chair screeched back. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, trying to quiet her down, but she shook him off. Michael just stood there, paralyzed, the color drained from his face. They passed right by me as they left the courtroom, lost in their own storm of anger and despair. They didn't see me. I was invisible, just as they had always wanted me to be. I met David at a coffee shop nearby. "It's a hollow victory, isn't it?" I said, staring into my cup. "It's not a victory, Emily," he corrected me gently. "It's an accounting. You simply balanced the books." Over the next 10 days, the reports from my investigator painted a grim picture. They were selling their furniture online for pennies on the dollar. Sophia had apparently left, taking her designer clothes with her, after one final epic screaming match. The doorman reported seeing her get into a taxi with 3 large suitcases, shouting into her phone about how she wasn't going down with a sinking ship. Michael was left alone to pack up the remnants of their life. One of the neighbors, An elderly woman I had made a point of being kind to in the past, called David's office. She said she'd seen Michael in the hallway late one night, sitting on a stack of boxes, just weeping. The image stabbed me. My son. Alone and broken. The urge to call, to go to him, to fix it, was a physical force. But I resisted. James's words came back to me. It's time to claim your throne. A queen doesn't abdicate her power out of pity. She wields it with wisdom. Michael needed to feel the full weight of this. He had to hit rock bottom before he could even think about climbing back up. 2 days before the eviction deadline, David received an unexpected call. "It's Michael," David told me when he called me. "He's begging for a meeting. Not with me. With the owner of Phoenix Properties. He says he has to talk to them face to face." The question hung in the air. Did I want to see him? "He says he knows he has no right to ask for anything," David continued. "He just wants to understand." I thought for a long, hard moment. The final move in the game. "All right," I said, my voice firm. "Tell him the owner will grant him a 10-minute meeting. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. At your office. Do you want me there?" David asked. "No," I said. "This is a conversation I need to have alone." The next day, I sat behind David's enormous desk, in his high-backed leather chair. I was the picture of corporate power. I had arranged the eviction paperwork in a neat stack in front of me. I was calm. My heart was a block of ice. At 3 p.m. on the dot, David's assistant showed Michael in. He looked even worse than he had in court. He was unshaven, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He walked in, his head down, like a man on his way to the gallows. "Thank you for seeing me," he began, his voice hoarse, addressing the empty space in front of him. "I know I have no right." He looked up then, and he saw me. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He stared, his brain visibly short-circuiting as it tried to reconcile the woman in front of him, this powerful, poised figure in a designer suit, with the mother he had discarded. "Mom," he finally whispered, the word full of disbelief and horror. "Sit down, Michael," I said. My voice was not my own. It was the voice of Phoenix Properties. It was cold, crisp, and held all the power in the room. He stumbled into the chair opposite the desk, his eyes never leaving my face. What is this? What are you doing here?" "I am here," I said, gesturing to the room, to the building, to the city outside the window, "because all of this is mine." I tapped the stack of papers in front of me. "Phoenix Properties is me." He recoiled as if I had struck him. No, that's impossible. Dead never. Why didn't you say anything? Why would I asked, allowing a sliver of my true voice, my anger, to cut through. "So you and Sophia could have another reason to see me as a resource to be exploited. So you could feel even more entitled to the life you were living at my expense." "We didn't know," he cried, his voice cracking. "If I had known you were the owner, I never would have." "You never would have what, Michael?" I interrupted, standing up to lean on the desk, looming over him. "Would you have treated me better? Would you have respected me? Respect isn't something you give to a person because they have a certain net worth. I was your mother. That should have been enough." He shrank back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. He began to sob. Deep, ragged, broken sobs. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I was a coward. I let her walk all over you. I let her hurt you. That day, in the kitchen. Heard it. I heard everything. And I turned up the podcast. Because it was easier than confronting her. It was easier to sacrifice you." He had finally confessed. The words I had longed to hear. The admission of his ultimate betrayal. But they brought me no joy. Only a profound, weary sadness. "Do you only feel sorry now because you found out I have money?" I asked quietly. "Would this apology be happening if you still thought I was a poor, helpless old woman?" He looked up, his face a mess of tears and shame. "I don't know," he whispered, and the honesty of it was more devastating than any lie. "And that's the scariest part. I don't know what I became. I don't recognize myself." "Your marriage is over, isn't it?" I stated, not asked. He nodded miserably. "Sophia's gone. She said she didn't sign up to be married to a failure. She blames me for everything. And what do you think?" "I think," he took a ragged breath, "I think she's right. I am a failure. I lost my job last month. I've got nearly $50,000 in credit card debt. And in 2 days I will be homeless. It's ironic, isn't it? I made you homeless, and now here I am." "It's not ironic, Michael," I said softly. "It's cause and effect." His eyes pleaded with me. "Is this what you wanted? Revenge? To watch me lose everything?" I sat back down and considered the question. Had this all been about revenge? I looked at the broken man in front of me, the boy I had raised, and I found my answer. "No," I said, and I was surprised by the truth in my own voice. "I didn't want revenge. I wanted you to understand. I wanted you to feel, just for a moment, what it's like to have your world pulled out from under you. To be powerless. To be discarded. I needed you to hit the absolute bottom, because that's the only place you can start to build a foundation that isn't made of lies." "Well, you got what you wanted," he said, his voice hollow. "I'm here. The bottom. What now?" "Now," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "you start to climb. By yourself." I pushed a single piece of paper across the desk. It wasn't a legal document. It was a handwritten note. On it was an address and a name. He picked it up, confused. "What's this?" "That's the address of a homeless shelter on the east side. The man who runs it is named George. He's a good man. They will give you a bed and 2 meals a day, provided you are looking for work and stay sober. That's where you're going to live." He stared at the paper as if it were a snake. A homeless shelter. It's better than a park bench, Michael. I should know." The words landed with the weight of a physical blow. "And this," I said, sliding a second piece of paper over, "is the address of a construction company. They're always hiring general laborers. It's hard physical work. The pay is terrible. But it's a job. It's a start." He looked from the papers to me, his eyes full of a dawning, horrified understanding. He had expected me to swoop in and save him, to give him money, to let him move into one of my other apartments. He had expected me to be the mother he had always taken for granted. But that mother was gone. You're not going to help me," he whispered. "I am helping you," I said, my voice ringing with a strength I never knew I possessed. "I am giving you the one thing no one ever gave you. The opportunity to earn your own self-respect. You will live in that shelter. You will work that job. You will pay off every single penny of your debt. You will learn what it means to be a man, not the spoiled boy your wife and I enabled you to be." I stood up, signaling the end of our 10 minutes. "The eviction stands. You have 48 hours. He stood up slowly, his body trembling. At the door he turned back, his face a mask of desperation. "Mom, when I do this, if I do all this, can I call you?" I looked at my son, truly looked at him for the first time in years. I saw the frightened boy beneath the broken man. "You can call David's office and leave a message," I said. "He will let me know how you're doing. But you and I will not speak again until you have paid off every cent of your debt and you have held down a job for 1 full year. Not 1 day less." He nodded, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." And then he was gone. The months that followed were a new kind of quiet. I moved into a beautiful, sun-drenched house in a quiet neighborhood, one of my properties that I had renovated from top to bottom. I planted a garden. I took a pottery class. I started volunteering at a soup kitchen, the very one I had once stood in line at. David gave me monthly updates on Michael. He had moved into the shelter. He had gotten the construction job. The first few weeks were brutal. He called David's office once, on the verge of quitting, but he didn't. He kept going. He started sending small weekly payments to his credit card companies. It would take him years to pay it all off, but he was doing it. 1 year to the day after our meeting, David called me. He did it, Emily. He's been at the same job for 365 days. And he made his final credit card payment this morning. He's debt-free. My hand flew to my mouth, a sob of relief catching in my throat. He left a message for you, David said. He asked if you would be willing to meet him for a cup of coffee. He said he understands if the answer is no. That Saturday I sat at a small outdoor cafe. I saw him before he saw me. He was thinner but he looked solid. The construction work had put muscle on his frame. His hands were calloused. But it was his eyes that were different. The haunted, panicked look was gone. In its place was a quiet, steady calm. He looked like a man. He looked like his father. He sat down, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the table. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For not saving me," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "For giving me the gift of my own failure. It was the hardest year of my life. And it was the best year of my life. I finally know who I am without all the stuff. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry for the man I was." I reached across the table and, for the first time in over a year, I took my son's hand. It was rough and calloused, the hand of a man who worked for a living. "I know, Michael," I said, my own tears finally falling, but this time they were tears of joy. "I know. We didn't fix everything in that one afternoon. But it was a start. Real start." He had a small apartment of his own now, and he was proud of it. He was being promoted to a foreman. He was rebuilding his life, brick by painful brick. And me. I was happy. Truly deeply happy. I ran my multi-million-dollar real estate empire with a sharp mind and a kind heart. I traveled. Painted. I lived a life that was fully and unapologetically my own. My son and I started having coffee every Sunday. Slowly, tentatively, we began to rebuild. He never asked me for a single dollar. He didn't need to. He had something far more valuable. His own hard-won dignity. And I had my son back. Not the weak boy I had lost, but the strong man he had become. And we both, finally, in our own ways, were living happily ever after.